Well, good afternoon, everyone, and warm welcome to this webinar in which we are going to talk about the deterioration model output report in JunoViewer. So just briefly, what we are going to cover in this webinar is, apologies, I just need to get my slides up and running. So we're going to try to finish in approximately 20 minutes time. And we are going to just start off with a few slides to give you a quick big picture on exactly how the model report links to the DMS file. If you are not familiar with the DMS, don't worry about it, or if you're not used to modeling, all I'm going to talk about as far as the DMS is concerned is what elements of your model output report are controlled in the DMS. Then we'll go into JunoViewer and I will show you how to get the report, the 3 different ways that you can get the report. And then I'll give you a detailed walkthrough of the elements of the model output report. Now, the model output report, just in overview, is basically a complete summary of the forecast of your network condition that comes out of your JunoViewer deterioration model. So even if you have actually triggered your treatments using some other modeling software system, if you've imported that into JunoViewer and you've just set up the increments and the resets of your treatment, you could use the model in that way to forecast what the future network condition is going to be like. And the model output report gives you that information. And then perhaps most important, it gives you a breakdown of all of the treatments in your ForwardWorks plan broken down in different ways. And we'll discuss the details of that. So once we've gone through the details, we'll just take some questions. So in a big picture view, basically what you start with on your computer is normally your deterioration model setup file. And that DMS file is then uploaded to JunoViewer. The model is then run on that DMS file to predict the future network condition. And then, as I'll show you shortly, you can go in various places in JunoViewer and select to download that model output report, which then goes to your computer, and you can then look at that model output report. So these 2 files, the DMS and the model output report, are pivotal to drive your model output report. But both of them, once you've gotten them out of JunoViewer, are basically controlled on your desktop. And that's why we've already sent you 2 Excel spreadsheets. And those spreadsheets, we're going to spend most of the time looking at those spreadsheets. So we won't be working that much in JunoViewer. We're mainly going to look at these 2 spreadsheets and specifically talk about how they actually link together. Okay, so let's look at the different ways to download the report. The first way is after your model has run, to download it from the forecast summary page. The next way is directly from your long-running processes log, which if you are doing a modeling exercise, that's one of my favorites because it's automatically generated during the model run. So you don't have to go and open the forecast view or the forecast summary page. You can just directly download it from there. Or, of course, as many of you know, you can also download it from the forecast view. Okay, so let's jump into JunoViewer. I'm just going to switch screens briefly here. Okay, so here I'm logged into the JunoViewer training account. I hope all of you can see my JunoViewer screen. So let's go through those 3 ways that we said you can download the report. So the first way is to go to your modeling, to the modeling menu and go to forecast summary. If you go to the forecast summary page, you don't have to actually load the summary reports. I will do that now, but you can set that going, and then you can click on download full model report. So this button here. And this will then download the model report for you. It will take a while and it will be downloadable for you. You don't all have to do that. Probably if we're all doing it at the same time, it might take a bit long, but you can see my report is already available here in download. So I'm not going to open this file now. I'm going to first show you the 3 ways of actually looking at the different reports, or actually downloading the different reports, and then I'm going to actually open that. So just one thing that I've forgotten to do, I've just for a moment was a bit distracted because I saw this looks like an unfamiliar report, and the reason is I have not selected the correct ForwardWorks program here that I wanted to download the report for. So there I've just made a rookie mistake. Always make sure that you go and select the correct ForwardWorks program. So the one I want to download is this one called Model Report ForwardWorks Program. And if I download that, the correct file will be coming down to my computer. So just one word about these graphs that you can see here. These graphs are actually contained inside of the model report. So you don't have to actually do anything with these graphs if you are going to download the model report, because all of these different graphs that you can see here, these are all available inside the model report, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so this is the first way. Just to go back again, you go to the modeling menu, go to forecast summary page, and you go to this button down here that says download full model report. The second way, unfortunately here you will not be able to follow along with me, because I'm now going to go to my running processes page. And of course, I ran this model that we are looking at a few times to prepare for this webinar. So if I go to my running processes, you will see quite a few model runs here. In your computer, you, of course, will not see those. So the way, if you have just run a model as a long-running process, you can go to this to the model, and you can go to this button that says Show Logs. And then you can see these are all the logs that are being logged on the server while the model is running. So you can always, if you're doing a model run that takes quite a long time, you can always go and monitor these logs and see where the model is currently tracking, in which year is it modeling, how far is it, and if there's any error, you should also be able to see it here. But also there is downloads that will be added for you in here, and you can see there's quite a lot of information, but there's the 2 downloads. And you can also just tick this checkbox at the top here that says show only downloadable files. So if I do that, I can see only these 2. And then there's my second way of getting at the model report, is just to click this download button here. And again, there's my model report coming down. And you can see this is a bit faster than the other way I showed you. And the reason is that the model report is already generated and left on the server in your long-running process logs. And therefore, it's simply a file download. Whereas the previous way that I showed you, the model report again has to be generated. So remember about this one. This is a good way to quickly get at your model report, specifically if you're trying different things in your model and you want to download quite a few model reports. So the third way is probably the most familiar one, and that is to go to your forecast view under the ForwardWorks program menu. I go to forecast view, and I'm going to open this correct ForwardWorks program. This time it says model report ForwardWorks program. All right, and there you can see all of the treatments that have been generated in this model and the conditions and so forth. So this is just your general forecast view. And this is really the key to downloading your model report from the forecast view. You can see the printer button there. If you hover your mouse over it, it says export full model report. And so that is the third way of actually getting at your model report. So once again, if I click on that, it will take a while and the model report will be downloaded for me to my computer. Okay, so just to recap then, 3 different ways of downloading the model report, but they are all exactly the same report that you are getting. All right. So now I'm going to just go to my Windows Explorer and look at the files, the 2 spreadsheets that I have already given to you that have been sent to you in the email. Or if you've just downloaded them, you can also look at those files and open them if you were able to download them. Here I am in my folder for this webinar. And the two files that I'm interested in is the first one here that says model report. And it's got in capital letters, this is the actual report. All right. Okay, so I'm going to open up this file in Excel, model report, capital letters report behind it. And this is my actual model report. So what I'm going to do is to just walk you through some of the features, and then I'm going to tell you which of those features you can modify. And I will open the DMS file, which is the other one that was sent to you. That's this file over here. And then I will explain how these two files are linked in that way. So let's just go through the different features of the model report, starting from the left in terms of the different sheets. So you can see the model report automatically adds quite a few different sheets. Now, the first sheet is quite important, and that's just like basic meta information about this model run. So if you are, for example, doing different budget scenarios or something like that, it's quite easy to get confused about which model report you are looking at. So this is always a good way because it tells you exactly which files, the DMS files that were used, and also other features like, for example, your budget setup code and so forth. It also tells you when was the last model run date and what was the date that the data was downloaded on. So this is quite useful information just to make sure you are working in the right file. Looking at the tabs down the bottom here, you can see then the second tab says ForwardWorks program data. And this is just a standard ForwardWorks program, just like you would download from the ForwardWorks program page. So you can see this has got all your info columns that have been used in your model. And then towards the right over here, there's all your treatments that have been placed in your trigger or have been uploaded as committed treatments and imported into your model output. Okay, the third tab here then is graphs. So these are the graphs that I also showed you earlier in the forecast summary view. And these are breakdown graphs. And what they show you is the percentage of the segments in each one of these different bins. Now, one of the questions that we get most often is how do we actually change these bins to customize them? And so that's one way to immediately control that is through the DMS file. So I'm just going to minimize this file, and then I'm going to go back and open the DMS file, which was linked to this model report. All right, so here I'm in my DMS file, and the key to controlling the model report is all on the parameter sheet. All right, so in defining your model, you have to have a column for each one of your model parameters. And I've highlighted here for you two columns, and I'm just going to focus on these columns. So the one is RUT, and the other one is NASRA. And if you scroll down here, I'll just make this a little bit bigger. So if you scroll down here a little bit, you'll see that there's a line over here that says bins, breakdown bins code. And if I go to this code here and you look up at the top, you'll see that this code says it's a delimited coded format, right? And if you look at it carefully, you should be able to figure out quite easily how this works. So this says naught #5 green, and then there's a pipe symbol, and then it says 5.10 hash, oops, can't really see there, 8 yellow green, right? So you can modify this code any way you want to control the breakdown. So if, for example, if I wanted my rutting to have fewer bins and I wanted it to go from 0 to 10 as green, then I could modify it like that. 0 to 10 is green. And let's say I just wanted 2 bins. Then I can also delete this. I don't have to have that number of bins. And the next bin would then start at 10.01. And I will make that go right up to 1000. So I cover everything, and I'm going to say that's red. So now I've got a simple 2 two bin category. And if I upload this DMS and download my model report again with this modification in place, then this breakdown graph for rutting will only have two bins here. Okay, so I hope you get the pattern. That's basically the way that you can control it. Now, the other thing that you can control in your DMS with relation to these breakdown graphs is which of your model parameters do you get breakdown graphs for. So to control that, again, let's go to the DMS and you go to the rut parameter, for example. And if you look down here, where it says data classification, a little bit down here, where it says report breakdown graph, you'll see there's one of the parameter headers here says generate breakdown graph. And you can see I've set this false as false for most of them, except for a few of these parameters. I've modified it to read true. Okay, so there's a few of these that are true. And if I modify this and upload this ForwardWorks program and download it again, then you should see fewer of these breakdown graphs based on that updated DMS file. Okay, so you can control your bins and you can also control which of your model parameters you are getting these breakdown bins for. Now, these graphs are really just intended to give you a very quick overview of how your model run actually panned out. If you are actually preparing a report for a client using this model output report, you may find that you want to customize these graphs or do something with that. For example, you may want to not just have the percentage of treatment lengths, but you may want a length-weighted percentage of treatment lengths. Now, to do that, you would have to go to your raw model data. So, for example, there's my RUT data. I can go to the raw RUT output data and go and look at that data, and I'll just take you to the place in this file where you can find that. So if you go down the bottom here, you'll see there's all sorts of different summaries, and we're going to go back to those shortly. But if you go right to the end, you'll see that there is a position where your model parameters are actually provided for you. For example, I've got a RUT sheet here, and there's all my rutting data. So my first column is my initial data, and then you will see these RUT values are slowly going to go up over time, depending on what my RUT increment is for that segment, except where some treatment was placed. So for example, you can see there my RUT has gone down from 5.4 to 2.16. And here and there, you'll see wherever a treatment was placed, like here, the RUT went up to 21 millimeters, and then probably a rehabilitation was done and the RUT was reset completely in the next year, and then it slowly started to creep up again. So in this report is contained the detailed model data for any model parameter where you instruct in your DMS this model data to come down. And you can take this data and you can just simply add some space at the top. This report is now on your computer, so you've got complete control over it. And you can go and calculate statistics in all of these years, and you can draw your own graphs and prepare it according to exactly the format that you want. The raw data is actually available for you here. And if you really want to do a top-notch job in terms of your reporting on your modeling, that's the route that I would recommend you take. But for a very quick breakdown, these graphs are quite useful. And so the other element that you can control with regards to the breakdown graph is whether or not you see these labels on the graph. You can see some of them have them and some of them don't. So once again, that is controlled in your DMS file. So if I open up the DMS and go down here, you will see there is a flag here that says graph options. And if you go to this graph options, you will see there is a delimited code which says show label, and you can set that false to true. And then you can also set the font size of the labels. So that's quite important depending on how many bars you have and how many bins you have. You probably will want to control the size of the font of these labels. Generally, I don't really like to use them very much. I would rather report them as separate statistics, because in a graph like this, you're really looking at the big picture. Is the network deteriorating or improving in terms of that parameter? Then further down, you get a spending graph where we basically just show you whether your spending was over or under the budget. You can see in this model, there was a very slight surplus left at the end of every year. And then there is a breakdown of the different treatments over time. Now, once again, these graphs are just very basic. So they're not exactly the type of quality that I would normally like to put into a report. And the reason for that is not that we don't care about the quality, but it's simply that we're trying to, with minimal input from your side as a user, we're trying to generate a relatively rough indication of what's happening. So we need to be able to auto size the axes. We pick the legend colors and so forth for you. Otherwise, all of those things are going to inhibit you when you're actually doing your model run. So once again, these graphs with a breakdown of the different treatment types and the different treatment categories and so forth. Generally, I wouldn't use these for a report, but just for a quick view, they are quite useful. Now, where I would go to actually go and get this information from is I will go to these tabs which say cost summary, which gives you a breakdown of the costs in different years for different treatment types or different treatment categories. And then also this sheet that says treatment categories will give you a detailed breakdown of the number of treatments by category. So you can see in this model, I had 3 treatment categories. One of them was reconstruct, one was seal, and one was asphalt. So I can get for all categories, I can get a breakdown of how many treatments were triggered. Then I can get the square meter area of the treatments, and I can get the length of the different treatments. Now, where does JunoViewer get this length and area from? Well, that comes from the instruction that you give it in your DMS. So if I go back here to my DMS file and I go onto the parameters page, right to the left, the first 3 parameters are mandatory parameters, and they specify in your model which parameter specifies length, area, and shoulder area. So normally these would come from info columns that are in your model, in your ThoughtWorks program already, and you are simply extracting that information column out and using that in calculating the actual quantities. Okay, so this sheet basically gives you a breakdown of your treatments by category. The next sheet gives you a breakdown of the treatments by the actual treatment type. So you can see there's quite a few here. If I go by category, then there's only 3 categories. And of course, that's the reason for that is that I have many different seal types falling, all different types of seals, but they all fall into the seal category. The breakdown, however, the types of breakdowns are exactly the same as it is for the treatment categories, except now it's done by treatment. So once again, I get the number of treatments, I get the area, total area for each treatment type on each year, and I get the total length. Now you'll note as you go through these graphs, quite often you'll see there's a reference made to slow lanes and fast lanes. And if you go here and you look at slow lanes, it's all 0. Now this is just a holdover from one of the earliest days of our JunoViewer models, where we used our models quite extensively on multi-lane freeways. And it was quite important for the clients to specifically look at the treatments that were placed in the slow lanes where most of the heavy vehicles were traveling. So there is a way in JunoViewer in the model to delineate which lanes constitute slow lanes. However, here in New Zealand, this pattern doesn't work very well because of the way that the lanes are coded. And so generally you can just ignore this block that says slow lanes, and because all your lanes will be classified here as fast lanes. And actually down here below, you'll see a detailed breakdown per lane as well. So there's quite a lot of information to go through, but the pattern for all of them is the same. We're always looking at a breakdown of either treatment category or treatment type, and there's always a breakdown by count, area, and length. Okay, then we also have, going slightly to the left, we've got this tab that says spend by category. It gives you the actual spending. I'll just make this a little bit bigger. It gives you the actual spending in each of your modeling years, in each of your treatment categories. I'll just sync to that a little bit. And then I'll just discuss these columns, because this is actually a very handy sheet if you are doing quite intensive modeling and you're trying to fine-tune your model. So of course here I get the actual spending for each of my 3 categories. And then quite importantly, you also have an indicator here of the percentage budget utilization. So if you are running, for example, a trigger model, this will tell you how much of the budget in that year you are actually using. So if your triggers are set in a way that you don't actually trigger enough treatments, these percentages will be quite low. So you can see in this model, I'm utilizing almost all of my budget in every year. I can see it by this big percentage. Now, if I'm pushing my budget up and there's too much funding available, then this percentage utilization is going to drop off. And that's a very quick way to actually start looking at different budget scenarios and see where you are not utilizing all of your budget. That normally will give you an indication of the break point at which you are probably need to peg your spending as being ideal. Okay, so I think I've covered just about all of the really important things. The only other element that I want to point out in the model report is the KPI data. Now, in the KPI data, you're basically getting the key performance indicators for each of your model parameters for which you have asked to get performance indicators. So once again, that's controlled in your DMS file. So if I go here and I'll just go once again to rutting, then you will see in this column down here where we are asking for key performance indicators, you can have a true or false flag indicating whether that parameter is a key performance indicator, and then you can specify the statistics that need to be tied to that parameter. So you can see here I've got median value, 75th percentile, 90th percentile, and if I go now to my model output report, then you can see these will be the different parameters that are reported for that parameter, and here are the values in each year. So by plotting this, building your own little graph to just show how these KPIs track over time, you can get a good indication of whether your funding is sufficient or not. Some of the other tabs in here, like this one, lane info, is very seldom used. Lane info, for example, is only used if you have defined lane segments, which very few of our clients actually use. And similarly, some of the other information here, like life cycle costs, which just give you the spending over the full modeling period, are also not used very much. So I think if you go into this in detail, you'll find maybe a few other tabs here with information that I have not discussed in this webinar, but our time is a little bit constrained, and I think I've covered about 90% of the features in this report that you will use 90% of the time. So for quite a short webinar, I don't think that's too bad. And I hope that gives you a good indication of the type of information that you can expect to get from your model output report. So I think I'll stop there, and then we'll take any questions, Thomas. Okay, so I think I'll just expand then on this for 1 minute, and then if there are no questions, we'll close off with this webinar. The one thing that I didn't point out, because this gets a little bit into the weeds with details on the model report, but if you go down, if you scroll down a little bit to these graphs, you'll find down here there is an option to look at your increments for certain parameters. Now, this is really important if you actually want to calibrate your model to see where your deterioration model increments, how they compare to the observed increments that you have found on your network. So here, for example, I'm looking at RUT increments, the spread of RUT increments, and then JunoViewer also gives you the spread of the increments distribution in the first year. Here I've got another example of the roughness, the NASRA increments, and again, you get an indication where the central tendency lies and what the spread of these increments are. Now, if these are way too high or way too low, then that's an indication that you have to calibrate your deterioration model to give you more realistic increments. And actually, if you go down here, down at the bottom, you'll see there is a way to actually go and look at the detailed increments. Okay, so if you go down here to the left, towards the bottom, you should find here some increment information. For example, here you've got increment data, and this gives you, for those parameters where you've asked for, it gives you full statistics of all your modeling increments, except where there are resets that will not be included in this breakdown over all of the modeling years. Okay, so I think we'll stop there. Thank you very much for your attention, and thanks for tuning in and for all the support. Thanks very much, guys. Until next time, we'll say goodbye.